Beesley, your videographer from Two Hacks Publishing. Welcome to the College of Complexes, being held at Barbeck's Restaurant at 8949 Garland Road, Dallas, Texas. Gently embracing the east side of White Rock Lake. When I entered, I was greeted like coming home to Grandma's house, warm and friendly. When visiting the Barbeck's Restaurant, tell them you want your reservations for the next College of Complex class.
Well, welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 261st meeting since we started in February of 2009. Actually, it started in Chicago in 1951 for the purpose of solving all the world's problems. They're still working at it. We put a different speaker on every week, a different subject. We require a speaker to take a position on an issue or express a point of view. They have to be for or against something. They don't care what it is. We give them an hour to make a presentation. They go over an hour, we cut them off. If anybody interrupts the speaker, remind the interrupter that we only listen to one fool at a time. It's one of our rules. This is followed, then we have a question and answer period. That's not statements, but questions and answers. We get to, anybody, member of the audience here gets to ask questions of the speaker on what he had to say. And then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in the audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at this podium to respond to the speaker said for or against. The speaker gets the last word, gets a comment, and close the meeting. That's how it works. But before we put in our speaker, we have time for announcements. Now's the time. If anybody has an announcement, now's the time to do it. You got any announcements? You got an announcement? Come on up here. Come on up here. Make your announcement.
Good evening. You all, some of you anyway, have heard me talk here before. I'll just be very brief. Recently, I've become, how shall I say, disturbed by certain things I've seen and heard in society, and I feel like inclined I would like to do something about it. So I'm thinking about organizing a group that I have tentatively called the Society for the Encouragement of Rational Thought. And those of you who have heard me speak know my position on certain things. So if you're interested in joining me and doing something like this, I would love to hear from you. I'd like to get together with some other people who might be interested in doing something, taking some action to, as I put it here on my sign-up sheet, to dispel superstition, myth, and irrational modes of thought. So if you agree with that sort of activity, would like to get involved in something like that, I'd like to know who you are, and I've got a sign-up sheet here. It's asking for your name, phone number, and email address. You don't have to give me both, just one or the other, or both, whatever you want. But I'm going to pass this around, and if you're interested, please sign up. And then what I'll do, I'll contact you. If I get enough names, I'll contact you and we'll have a meeting. And we'll just take it from there, okay? So here it is. I'm going to pass it around. That's it. I'm done.
Any other announcements? Now's the time for announcements. Anybody else have announcements? No? Got announcements? No. All right. Come on up here. You got an announcement? Don, you got an announcement? No. Just checking. Any announcements? No? All right. Well, next week is Personal Philanthropy. That's by William Max Smith. He's going to discuss personal philanthropy. It's on the, I'm not going to read all this. It's on your handout sheet there. And March 7th, corruption in the multi-level marketing industry, Amway, and within the Republican Party. That should be interesting. And on March 14th, why Democrats lost the 2014 midterm election and what to do to win future elections. Calvin Bluette, he's a professor at Clear Valley College. He's been here many times. He'll be the speaker that day. On March 21st, we have on the future of Dallas County Schools, that's Larry Duncan. He's board president of Dallas County Schools. It's a school district with no students and no teachers. It's on your itinerary there. And there's a, if you go to the web, there's more information on it on the website. You can look it up. Anyway, Our speaker tonight is John Beesley. He's an English-born author, retired after a long career with Xerox, educated at London's Imperial College and University of Dallas, MBA, DIC, PhD. Will discuss how even though the U.S. is now in recovery mode, many still feel worse off and have a dystopian view of the future. He points out that the 2008 electoral call for change was not answered by much in the way of corrective political action, and that in fact, an 18th century view of the world has prevailed beyond all evidence to the contrary. John contends that the major political parties offer no coherent policy agenda, trusting no doubt that a laissez-faire approach is all that is needed. He further contends that a new political party setting out the problems with accompanying solutions might gain some traction, that certainly a party based on empirical evidence rather than a series of warped ideologies should appeal to the more thoughtful section of the community. One can only hope. So without further ado, please give a very, very warm welcome to John Beesley.
Right. No. Well, thank you for coming tonight, and my wife is even more grateful. So, it's pleased to see you all. So, some of you might know why on earth is this English guy coming over here and telling us what to do? How did I get here? Well, it's rather like the old joke told by Whoopi Goldberg. She said, "The white Americans love us black people. After all, they sent boats to come and get us." Well, I'm somewhat in the same boat. In the mid-60s, as you may remember, America was in the middle of the space race, so and they were all going down to Florida, to NASA and so on. So companies like Xerox needed people, so they actually sent teams of recruiters to Northern Europe, to England, to Denmark, Holland, Scandinavia, and so a whole group of us were recruited. I came over with about 15 different families, and it was really quite convivial because we all came together and we all had parties and we were all pretty young. So that's how I came to be here. Now, before I get into talking about America, because you will think I'm sort of doing down America, let me talk about briefly Europe. So let me talk about England first, because that's what I know most of all. I gave a talk once about Margaret Thatcher, and so I think the conclusion was she was pretty bad. She was followed by, after the Grey Man disappeared, by Tony Blair and New Labour. And he was even worse, would you believe? This book, titled Fantasy Island, was written in 2006, and that was when Tony Blair was bowing out of the scene. I won't read all the book tonight, but the back of it says this. It says, "Welcome to Fantasy Island, fantasizing about our ability to run up debts, to enjoy high-paid employment for which we are not qualified, to project military power we no longer possess, and yet assume an economic and political position superior to the rest of the world. We live in cloud cuckoo land." So that was the. Now, this book was written by Larry Elliott, PhD economics from Cambridge. Larry Elliott is currently economics editor of the Guardian newspaper in London. Now, talking about the Guardian newspaper, some of you may read it, but if you don't, every day on the web it publishes 3 different editions: a UK edition, a US edition, and an Australian edition. And what got me talking about why we need this progressive society was because about 4 or 5 months ago, in its US edition, it asked its American readers to write in and express their experiences and concerns as middle-class Americans. And basically, there was a general air of, I'd say, dystopian angst, like almost a loss of hope. One prevailing thing was this terrible overhang of college debt. But let me not speak for myself on this. Let me tell you what some Americans felt, as expressed in The Guardian. There was a lady called Morgane Bergman, and she said, America has been bought out by the multinationals. The people have no representation anymore. The corporations and government see us as either parasites or free labor. They have turned paradise into hell, and we're exporting it to a nation near you. Now, that was Morgane's view of things. Another person wrote that it reminded him of a poem called Dinosauria by Charles Bukowski, an American poet. The poem goes like this. We are born like this, into these carefully mad wars, into the sight of broken factory windows of emptiness, into bars where people no longer speak to each other, into fist fights that end in shootings or knifings. Born into this, into hospitals which are so expensive it's cheaper to die, into lawyers who charge so much it's cheaper to plead guilty, into a country where the jails are full and the madhouses closed, into a place where the masses elevate fools into rich heroes. So this, reading all this set me thinking, as usual. So my view is that both parties since 1940 have been complicit in what I term sabotaging America. And my book talks about that, exact sabotaging. And frankly, from an economics viewpoint, the Democrats have been most culpable. And I'll spend a whole nother lecture talking about that. But that's my view. Culpable. This is why, because I think both parties are almost equally to blame for things, we need a progressive party, because we're heading for a crash. And it may be economically fatal. So we need to do something about it. So we need a progressive party to stand up and say, look folks, we're in a serious situation, we need to do something. Now you won't get either party saying anything like that. At least I've not heard them yet. So let's peel the onion a bit more. Let's look at the economic situation as it is. As I've said, I believe there's been total economic mismanagement in this country. Total, beyond belief. I can't really still believe it, but it's total and very bad. For example, the most telling thing, I think, and I'm talking about today, I'll talk about empirical evidence, not beliefs, not airy-fairy stuff, but actual numbers, what's actually happened. Because that's, being an engineer scientist, I deal in facts, not fantasy. So after World War II, America emerged from the war after huge deficit spending. It ended the war with a debt of 120% of gross national product, which it brought down, but it was really that debt, that surge in fiscal spending that got America up and out and got going. So it ended the war as a huge creditor nation, the biggest creditor nation in the world. So where are we now, 50 years later? America is now the biggest creditor nation. So you went from people owing you money to America owing the rest of the world money. Now, America owes the rest of the world about 1 year's earnings, GDP. Now, what we're doing is we're handing out IOUs, paper, to import goods. And even as we stand here today, the trade deficit is running at 40 billion a month. 40 billion a month. When someone says, no more, we have enough paper, and we don't trust you to pay it back, that's it. That's when a huge crash is going to happen. Now, when they do that, I don't know, but it's going to be within the next few years. It just can't go on like this, because no country, China has done very well out of this. They're happy to go along with this, but now, after they've bought all the houses in London, pushed up the prices, they just can't spend enough of it. So they're going to turn around and say, okay, well, now's the time we're going to spend it on our own people and not buy your useless, worthless IOUs. So what else has gone on? Well, we've had massive deregulation, as you know. Every time you turn around, everyone says, oh, we must deregulate more. So where has this led us? Well, in the period from 1950 to 1980, we didn't have a severe financial crash. It didn't happen. But since then, every 8 years now, we've had a pretty severe crash. And the recovery from that crash has been longer, and the crash is progressively deeper. So, for example, the recovery from the 2008 crash has been at 2% a year growth in GDP. From the 2001 crash, it was 3%. The recovery from the 82 crash was 5%. And the recovery from the 61 crash was 6.5%. So we are not recovering as fast as we used to. Now, there are reasons for this, and I'll go into that. Now, what's happened to the average male wage during this period? Well, it peaked in 73 and has basically stagnated. But since the crash, it's the real wage, that's to say the real buying power, has decreased by 8%. That's part of why people feel this angst. Their money is not buying what it used to. We had inflation, but wages have gone up slower than inflation. The other thing that's happened is that the US has now become the most unequal country in the world by far. The next country is Portugal, and the next country is the United Kingdom. The most equal is Japan, followed by the Scandinavian countries. So where did all this, because there has been growth in the economy, it's virtually all gone to the 1%, as we know. Now, and to see what's happened, last year the sale of mansions, these big mansions, went up by 21%, whereas the overall sale of houses went down by 7%. Now, one of the reasons for this slow recovery is usually recoveries are fired by housing starts. But that's not happened because we were overbuilt on housing. So that's one factor why it's been so slow. Now, of course, one of the biggest lies that ever was told by Arthur Laffer, was Reagan's economic advisor, and he whispered in his ear that supply-side economics was the way to go, okay? So basically what that meant was you give more money and benefits to the people with money because then they will spend it promoting the economy. Well, it's a pack of nonsense, of course. In fact, there's no evidence to say that rich people build new factories when there's a declining demand. It just doesn't happen. In fact, that was the notion, trickle-down economics. That was the prevailing notion, and many people bought it. In fact, they still do. They still think that these geniuses abound, and they're all entrepreneurs, and they're going to spend all their money. Well, this 1%, where has their money gone? Well, most of it has gone abroad in tax havens. Now, the US is twice diminished by this because, one, the money is going out, not being spent building these supposedly new businesses and so on, plus they're not paying taxes. So the federal government, it loses tax, and these new industries that should pop up are not being funded. Now, the other thing that's happened, as I've just said, we've had stagnating real wages, in fact, since the crash, declining wages, real wages. Now, 70% of the economy, the demand economy, is driven by consumer spending. Now, when they don't have the money, the real money, then obviously the economy cannot grow. So when the 1% basically steal all the growth, they're actually stopping growth, or growth in money, actually stopping expansion in the economy. Now, the people that have suffered the most in all of this are the millennials. The millennials are the people from 18 years old to 34 years old. Their real earnings has declined by 10% over this period. And only 3 out of 10 of them are actually married. Because really, everything's gone up, they really even can't afford. They live at home with mum and dad. That's it. Now, one problem they have, of course, is the cost of college. Now, the cost of college has gone up by a factor of 11 since 1979. And that's placed a huge burden on them. 22% have college degrees and 18% of them are unemployed. It's not a satisfactory state of affairs. We have really, our age group, we've really shortchanged these people. It's been a true disaster. So if we have a crash every 8 years, which is about what normally happens, we are about 2 years away from, or a year or so away from the next one. And if the GOP gets elected and we have austerity plan, then goodness me, we're really going to see a crash. So, as I say, a lot of it started with the supply side and Ronald Reagan, but as he did it, one day he looked out of the window and he said, "Oh, it's morning in America. We're going to be the shining city on the hill." Well, as usual, he got everything totally backwards. The sun was going down. It was in fact twilight in America. And what was really happening that he didn't realize, we were entering the age of arbitrage. Arbitrage, I'll explain what arbitrage is as we go along, but that's what we've had, basically, the age of arbitrage. Now let's see basically the overview of the economic situation. Now let's talk about the finance industry. Well, of course, I think we all know much about it. Basically, it isn't fit for purpose, basically. Now, here, written in 2006, is an interesting excerpt which I'll read to you. "We believe an almighty financial crash is likely, and the upshot will be a backlash against the excesses of financial markets of a kind not seen for 75 years. There will be cause for lending to be more strictly regulated. There will be pressure for higher taxes on unproductive speculators. There will be demands for a tax on foreign exchange speculation, and there will be firewalls erected to prevent footloose capital from destabilizing democratically elected governments. All this would be highly desirable. The only pity is that reform now could avoid the crash." Well, didn't happen, and it hasn't happened since the crash. But really, this is what should happen. So Larry Elliott, economist in London, saw this crash coming 2 years. The signs were all there. And by the way, if you looked at the Fed funds rate, what happened in 2007, they knew a crash was coming because those rates came down. So what about the financial industry? Well, basically since we've had massive deregulation, it's totally self-serving and not serving the public. It's transmogrified into a giant gambling casino. Basically, it's engaged in total asset speculation and manipulated speculation at that. For example, Goldman Sachs actually owns metal warehouses. And so they were able to control the supply of metals around the world. So much so that the aluminum was shut down for a time, so the people like Coca-Cola had to protest, say, "We can't get supplies, we'll go out of business." So that's what an outfit like with such power as Goldman Sachs can do. But the biggest speculation has been on the Forex market, the currency exchange market. You have a total flow of money in the Forex market each day of $4 trillion. $4 trillion each day. Now this is where arbitrage comes in, because if you go look, as they do on computer screens, and see the price of a dollar in London, all the way down the chain, say through the euro, through the peso, and back to the dollar, you'll see small discrepancies. And if you throw billions at it, buying and selling down this chain, you will gain fractions of a cent on each dollar. So if you have enough billions to throw it, you can make a tidy profit. And that's what's been happening. That's where, so Charles here asked me about where did this quantitative easing go from the Fed. Basically, it went to the banks, and most of it was flowing through the Forex market. And of course, as we know, if you're following the news, the exchange rates, which control the value of currency, has been manipulated in London, which is where all the crooks went to. I announced that in my first talk. Most of everyone's laughed, but it's true. Because every day of the week now, we're seeing another bank being hauled up and fined for doing corrupt things, like laundering drug money, giving, any crook in the world can come and they'll help them out. I wish I had enough money to be helped out in such a way, but never mind. So basically, that's where the money has gone. Now, this so-called free market that everybody's supposed to believe in has been totally rigged. I mean, there's no such thing, if there ever was a free market, but there certainly is one now. Because every market you look at, from metals to stock to anything, gold, is rigged. Okay? It's rigged. Okay. Now, one measure of what happened in this wonderful financial industry is back in 1975, the amount banks borrowed to do this gambling operation was 18% of the gross national product. Now, just before the crash, it was 120%. So their borrowing went up by about, now they were the biggest borrowers of all, because they were gambling on everything, as you know, the mortgages, derivatives, everything. But it's pure speculation. It does nothing to help the real economy. So basically, these banks are not fulfilling their purpose, which is to make sure the real economy grows and everyone does well. No, and in fact, after the crash, there was even more consolidation in the banking world. So, and I've talked about cartels before, but they're worldwide and they're a super cartel. And they're really, I'll go on in a minute, but that's what's happened. That's why there's been no inflation, because that money did not, even though the Fed was pouring trillions in, probably up to now about 4 or 5 trillions, it all went on this gambling operation. Not much. That's why you didn't get much inflation. What inflation did go on was because the trade unions, which have been blamed for everything, especially in the 70s, for putting inflation, have been out of the picture. So when the prices go up, certainly not unions demanding more money, it's corporations putting up prices. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Well, let's get on to the political system. Again, it's not fit for purpose. So what is it doing? What is it doing? Well, it's serving the interests of their paymasters, the financial industry and the corporations. It's certainly not doing much for the average Joe in the street. We've had, ever since 1979, when Carter was in power, we've had one deregulation after another, not just Glass-Steagall, but there's been deregulation after deregulation after deregulation in the financial industry. So what that has meant really is the banks have got more wealthy, the corporations have got more wealthy. As I said, growth in wages has slowed, in fact has gone backwards. So we've had growing poverty, growing inequality, and we've had financial crashes. And prove me wrong, folks, have we not? We've also had this promotion of globalization by the political class of both parties. And the Democrats were probably worse than the others. So we've basically had, because of that, we've had industrial vandalism on a massive scale. I mean, the scale of wealth transfer to China and the knowledge has been staggering. By people really, I would say, they come out on the Capitol steps with their American flag pins in their, they're traitors to America. They've basically sold the country out. So, all right, thank you, folks. Your appreciation is gratefully received. Antitrust laws have been unenforced, and so we have monopoly and oligopoly capitalism in America, and we have cartels overseas. So basically, the title of my next book is Sabotaging Democracy, because that's what's happened. The little guy can, he votes once in a while, but nothing much is going to happen. Okay, let's talk about the illegal system. My view is it's unbalanced and unfair. Now, this is a good year to talk about it, because you know what happened 800 years ago on Runnymede. That was the signing of the Magna Carta, June 15th, 1215. Now, what that meant was that nobody was above the law, not kings, not anybody. 400 years later, King Charles decided that he was going to be above the law, and so there was a war, and the legal system said, well, you've committed treason, and so they chopped his head. Actually, they hung him outside Whitehall, so that dispensed with him. And then we had Oliver Cromwell for a bit. But when the next king came along, they made him sign the Bill of Rights, so that when he fled, because he was a Catholic and we didn't like Catholicism at that time, a new king came in, and he agreed. Actually, Queen Mary came, and she married William of Orange, and they were made to sign a further Bill of Rights, on which the American Bill of Rights is based. So it's time to have a good look at this Bill of Rights. But what it means is that the people have the rights, not the corporations, not the kings, not the nobles, not the CEOs, but the mass of people. Now, when corporations were brought into being in the 19th century, they were chartered by states, individually by the states. And when they were chartered, the states proscribed a lot of their activities because they realized what this concentrated power of money could do. But gradually, over a period, US federal law began to trump states' law. And the Supreme Court did some remarkably ridiculous things. For example, granting corporations personhood in 1886. But gradually, because of the way the Supreme Court worked, the property rights were embellished, profit maximization was enshrined, and now we've had unlimited funding for corporate interests by the Citizens United law. I mean, basically, we see in England there never was a Supreme Court, and I'll talk about that. It was an American invention, which has, in my mind, not turned out too well. So now we have the US Constitution. Again, totally new an invention, but revered by all, which is interpreted by this Supreme Court, which is strange because it's been totally politicized, so that instead of having one body of law that everyone agrees to, it goes to the Supreme Court, and the decisions come down 5-4. Apparently, if you're a Democrat or a Republican, you can interpret this law either way. Well, I mean, come on, you can't have laws being, how can there be a law if it can be completely oppositely interpreted? It doesn't make sense to me. So let's look at the legal system as it operates. One in every 31 Americans are in some kind of legal restraint, either in jail, on parole, or under judicial control of some sort. America has the largest prison population in the world, and most people there are for non-violent crimes. 2/3 of the prisoners are black or Hispanic, And once you have paper on you, you can forget working again in a decent job. I speak to young Hispanics all the time. That's what they tell me. I say, well, what about blah, blah, blah? Can I earn some money from you? And they say, well, they say, well, you know, I did this and can't get a job anymore. So, as everybody knows, crime is the only equal opportunity employer under this circumstance. So, I'd say the legal system needs a good look at. Corporations. Let's get to corporations. My diatribe is not finished, folks. They are responsible, they're the prime culprit for sabotaging this country. And basically, apart from sabotaging the country, they've totally corrupted the political system. Now, we've had a total failure of corporate governance, and it's basically backwards. We have an unprecedented inequality, really. Now, Plato, you may have heard of, said that the wealth differential should be no more than 6 to 1. John Pierpont Morgan, rest his soul, said perhaps 20 to 1 might be sufficient. The average CEO today is 1,000 to 1. And in the most extreme example, it's 10,000 to 1. Now, I've seen some of these characters at the top, and I wouldn't say their value is more than about 2 to 1 than anything else. I mean, sometimes I'll talk about the trail of wreckage that the Xerox has done. I mean, invented most things, and anyway, never mind. So where are we, the corporate? Well, currently corporate profits are at a record high. They're taking a larger share of the gross national product than ever, at 12.6%. And by the way, they're still asking for more tax reductions. It looks like Obama will grant it to them, because apparently they need it for competitive reasons. By the way, they in fact, although they say they don't, they actually welcome this influx of cheap labor, these illegals, because they man the agricultural system and the meat packing and other such businesses. So despite everything, they actually like this cheap labor. So in general, getting back to arbitrage, we actually have labor arbitrage. The corporations have gone around the world and they seek the cheapest labor, and that's labor arbitrage. So we have financial arbitrage by the financial companies, and we have labor arbitrage conducted by the corporations. So now we see corporations that the cartels overseas. In fact, where does their money now reside? Now, they don't repatriate it, so it goes into tax havens. So you have grand tax evasion, and we even have a headquarter reversion, where companies move out of America. For example, Kraft took over Cadbury's in England, and their headquarters is a brass plate on an office in Switzerland, Zug, Switzerland. There's no one behind that plate, but just for tax reasons, it serves its purpose. So, and of course, that is what has been a big bone of contention in England. All these West Coast big companies that you think are Democrat, like Starbucks, Apple, and so on, are all offshore, paying virtually no taxes to anybody. Now, it turns out that of every 5 manufacturing jobs that were lost, and every downturn we have a massive loss of manufacturing jobs, over and over and over. Of every 5 jobs that have been lost, only 1 has been replaced, and 70% of those are in auto world. Now let's talk about CEOs. 7 of the 30 largest corporations pay their CEO more than they pay in taxes. Now, the workers' terms of employment, workers' terms of employment have been degraded. We have internships for the young. That's to say, you have to go out, you have to pay to work to get experience. We have part-time jobs run by major corporations so that you can avoid paying benefits. You can have reductions in pensions contributions and higher employee contributions for healthcare. So generally speaking, you've had a considerable lowering of the standard of living in America across the board, and this is what has caused this angst. Because basically they've not felt any benefit from this so-called recovery. Now another fine organization is the NRA. Do you know what the NRA is? Not the one you think. The National Restaurateurs Association. 1996, with their pressure, they introduced what's called the Fair Labor Standards Act, and they set their minimum wage. Guess what at? $2.13 an hour. So when you go to a restaurant, the employee is basically paying their social insurance contribution, but you are paying their wages. That's what's happening. So really, people relying basically for tips have a very uneven income. And currently, as we stand here, as I stand here, and you sit here, there's been large layoffs been announced. IBM, for example, has announced 118,000 layoffs from Coca-Cola, eBay, American Express, US Steel. So these huge layoffs are happening, all the time. So, as I say, this large-scale deindustrialization that's happened has led to these huge record trade deficits. And so we've been flooded by cheap imports. Now, I think I talked to Joe and I said, only the rich can afford these cheap imports. Because they're such rubbish that you have to replace them every few seconds. Now, I hope none of you are having to take drugs, generic drugs, because most of them come from abroad and they're very, very dubious quality. And that even goes for branded drugs. Now, my wife and I are lucky we don't take any drugs at all, of any description. In fact, we believe in walking, exercise, and eating right. The other thing that's happened is every product you buy now, it has parts, is inferior parts. Now, I have a little mini real estate empire, so I go around repairing air conditioning systems a lot. Now, when a system shuts down outside, the first thing I look at is what new parts have I put in. So I see something that never used to happen. Capacitors failing after a year. Contactors failing after 18 months. And I took to regular AC guys and that's it. These are junk parts. So maybe Granger, where I buy the parts from, loves it. They're buying these cheap parts, they fail out and you go back again. Maybe the AC repairman loves it because he's going to back every 2 or 3 years. And it will cost you, what, $200 to $250 a trip for a part that costs about $20. I mean, the old AC stuff, the old stuff, you may know this yourselves, lasts almost forever. The new stuff just doesn't last. So America is paying a huge price for buying this junk from China. Now, my wife, as you know, comes from Finland. She bought some Marimekko sheets, up from someplace up the road. She looks at the label, it says washing cold water. Marimekko sheets in Finland, you can wash in hot water because they're much better quality. So basically, America is getting cheap imports, but they're being shortchanged, really. Plus, destroying the economy to boot. So people like Grangers are making tons of money, some people are doing well, but overall, we're not doing so well. Healthcare. Basically, it's nearly unaffordable. It turns out it's the most expensive and most inefficient in the world. America pays per capita, that's to say per person per year, over $9,000. England pays just $3,000, everyone's covered. And I bet the health performance in England is better than the US. So where does the US rank in comparisons around the world? Well, it ranks 37th below Dominica and Costa Rica. That's an outstanding number. Spends the most, gets these results. I mean, I'd say something's wrong here. So even after the Affordable Care Act, we would still have over 30 million people uninsured. Education. It's just about unaffordable. Now, in world rankings, the so-called PISA test, when 15-year-olds around the world are measured, America also now comes in about 35th or so. Turns out that Finland, little Finland, with about 4 million people, comes in number 1 or number 2. So how is that? And also, in Finland, they pay for college. Again, something's gone wrong. Now, at the graduate level, the US has some of the best colleges in the world. But we have a plethora of complete rubbish. I mean, these institutes like this Phoenix and, yeah. And as I said, since 79, the cost has escalated by a factor of 11. So something's not right here someplace. Now, student debt is larger than car loan debt or credit card debt. It's one of the largest, after mortgages, it's the largest debt out there. And now, June last year, the wonderful Republicans blocked a bill that would have enabled students to refinance their student loans. So we can refinance our mortgages, but not our student loans. So I wonder why that has happened. So that's sort of a skimming over the top of some of the things that I think are key parameters of the economy. So I look at this and say, oh, okay, folks, let's step back and take a look at this. Now, my view is that only radical measures can fix this. You can't go voting in Democrats or Republicans because they're not going to fix it. Because both parties support the status quo. Both have duped the public. The Democrats do not represent the little man. They represent the rich donors, but mostly on Wall Street. Similarly, the GOP does not care about family values, does not care about the average guy. Okay? In fact, many of their policies would destroy families, that's it. They again only care about their rich donors, mostly from corporations. So if you think either party is going to do much for America, think again, folks. So we need some radical changes. But we need a progressive party that will hold a mirror up to say, look, these are the facts. These are the numbers. This is what's happened. There ain't no shining city on the hill. You know, we are not doing very well as a country. We have to step back and say, what should we do? Well, here are some ideas. Okay. Now, almost a century and a half ago, Abraham Lincoln said, government should be of the people, by the people, for the people. And I would say yes, and not for the cartels. Okay? As you know, I was a manager in Xerox for a long time. I was a line manager, an area manager, and so on. I got to a reason. Now, my duty, as I saw it, was to make every person that worked for me a success. And sometimes I would guide them this way and that way, but my job was to make everybody a success, because if they were successful, I would be successful. And by and large, we were. Now, my view about a government is its duty is to help every American succeed. Because that way, if everybody succeeds, then America succeeds. And right now, it's not succeeding. Given what I just said, this last 20 minutes or so, I don't think it's succeeding very well. Now, I think one thing a progressive party should say is we're going to promote the Christian values of the New Testament rather than the punitive values of the Old Testament. That's to say, we're going to act like Jesus Christ. We're going to help people. We're going to be kind, compassionate. We're going to pick people up when they're down. That's what we should do. We should not be punitive, not look to the Old Testament to punish people. Doesn't work, is bad. I was in a rowing aid. Everyone in that aid rowed, and everyone was rowing. We won. If you imagine 2 or 3 people not rowing, you couldn't win anything. So it's everybody working together that wins. So let's talk about the economy. Well, I think everyone's questions the Federal Reserve. I've said that really the Federal Reserve is a private bank. It's basically run for the benefit of the bankers. We have this wonderful cozy money club where people come from Wall Street to the Federal Reserve to government and back again. And this big bailout that happened 6 or so years ago bailed out the banks when they were broke. Personally, I would let them go broke after the government take it over and start again. That's what any business that went broke and did the crazy things they did, that's what would have happened. If I started up a business down the street and I went broke, who would come and bail me out? Certainly not the federal government. Basically, monetary and fiscal policies should have to be run together. There's a famous ISLM curve, which is the supply and demand for money, and where they cross is where the economy balances. Now those curves, one is moved by fiscal means and one is moved by monetary means. Now, to get it in balance, the two have to be worked together. So you can't have one private institution controlling money supply and the government controlling fiscal spending. That must be controlled together by some independent body. Yeah, so that's another thing is, an international institution must be set up to force balance of trade. You can't have this imbalance of trade going on together because we know the end of it. It's going to crash. Now, Keynes proposed a system in 1944 based on the Bancor, rejected by the FDR government. Bad mistake. Bad mistake. We should break up the international cartels by enforced antitrust legislation. And these cartels, I think I've said this before, over 50 of these cartels, of the 100 richest organizations, including countries, over 50 are cartels in the world. So their power is immense. And they now, because of these free trade agreements, can move money around at the touch of a button. And they can destabilize and have destabilized governments. I mean, it's very dangerous. And now, because of these free trade agreements, they want to set up an international court to sue governments when they're not making enough profit. I mean, it's preposterous. Totally preposterous. Financial system. Well, since it's not fit for purpose, well, what would you do to change it? Well, restoring the Glass-Steagall won't do it. We need a super Glass-Steagall, in my judgment. We need 4 tiers. We need the regular high street banks that issue credit cards and give us loans and stuff like that. We need to bring back mutual S&Ls for house buying, so whereby the bank's on the hook, so they make sure that the loans are good. And we need proper industrial investment banks that invest via long-term bonds to businesses, and that means that all of our pension money and insurance funds actually go into this investment bank. So it's actually forced to go into productive America. And fourthly, we have casino banks, which if you put your money in, good luck. But of course, the casino won't have as much funds flowing in because they won't have all this big pot of money to use. So you would basically cut them down to size, or hopefully remove them altogether. Political system. Well, I've said this before. The American system is back, we've seen what's gone on. I mean, it was set up to force gridlock. I mean, I think Joe told the story some weeks ago, whereby he was up in Denison Sunday morning buying some stuff. And the guy in front, dressed like somebody out of Duck Dynasty, was wanting to buy this bottle of wine. And the cashier said, "No, sir, we can't do this." And this guy said, "Oh, bloody Obama's done it again, he's responsible." I mean, it's got nothing to do, you know. Americans have a curious idea that whatever goes on is the responsibility of the president. Well, you know, had they read the Constitution? I mean, you know, he has actually quite limited powers. I mean, the money, you know, is controlled by the House of Representatives. And if they're at odds with everyone else, we have to have totally gridlock. So, this is not a good system. I mean, a good old parliamentary system really works quite well. Has worked when, the Simon de Montfort back in the 14th century, it's worked pretty well. We have had no reason to change it. Now, because of Tony Blair, we now have a Supreme Court, which I would do away with. For the in a parliamentary system, we elect the government. And in fact, there's going to be an election in May in England. And, you know, the great spending goes on for, you know, most about a couple of months, that's it, low spending. We should have free airtime and public funding of contestants. I mean, basically, you can't have the Koch brothers and others selecting candidates, which Tony Beveson, as a character that Joe knows, has seen. Koch brothers had a meeting in California a while back and basically said, well, we want to choose the candidates. Well, wonderful. And of course, what we really need to do is to match a system of matching the deeds of these people, these politicians, with their manifestos. You have a manifesto, you say you're going to do something, and you do the opposite. That should be high on the agenda of public notification. This guy has lied to us. The other thing we really need to do is to remind the politicians, when you take a public office, you should swear a public oath that you're a servant of the people. You're not a master of the people. You can't grant yourself privileges that the ordinary people do not have. And by the way, if you betray the public trust, you're in jail. Not for a little time, but a long time. The legal system. Well, I think we should change the Constitution a little bit to reinforce individual rights. I do not like overweening government. I really don't. I think it always has to be held to account. We should have some form of ombudsman at every level. It's a Swedish system, whereby you can always appeal around it. And I think the highest court in the land should be the U.S. Senate, because in fact in England it's the House of Lords until Blair came along. So, because that's your highest elected representatives, and they can change the law. So you don't appeal to this constitutional thing, and I just don't buy that myself. So, as you understand, these are my what I would do, okay? I believe you should be able to act pro se in any court. Now, in some courts, you have to have a lawyer to represent you, because only a lawyer can write motions and stuff like that. Well, I don't agree with that. When you appear in court, you should be able to act pro se and write your own motion. And that's what I have done on several occasions. Not in certain, no. The probate court one. The probate court one. And I've got that going right now. The common law, which of course is derived from should never ever be superseded. And yet, in Texas, it is superseded on certain occasions. If you read the law, it says it overrides common law. Well, nothing should override common law. In general, the legal system should be remedial rather than punitive. Okay, but we, for some reason or the other, we appeal to the Old Testament and we love punishing people. And of course we shut down mental health facilities, and a lot of people in jail never should be there. They should be in mental health facilities. Corporate business. Well, I've said this before, it's old news to some of you. What we need is jobs. Now, once an economy crashes, then the layoffs start and the jobs diminish. It takes a long time to come back. So, what I would do is what they do in Italy. What they do there in Italy is they have 10 unemployed people, they group them together and they fund them to start some form of a business. Now, I would make that the standard way of starting businesses. And as you know, I like employee ownership. The most respected businesses in England, Waitrose and John Lewis, and it's 90,000 people, works very well. It's all employee owned. Basque Country of France, Mondragon is like over 100,000. It's totally employee owned, and it makes white goods like refrigerators, software. So it's all employee owned. And in the latest downturn, it laid hardly anybody off. So that to me is economic democracy. When people ask me, well, what's my status in America? I say basically I was a hired hand, that's it. I was not some superior person, I was just a hired hand, so that was, so, and when you work in a corporation, it's hierarchical. If you have a disagreement with someone above you, which is, you generally lose because these people regard themselves, especially at the top, as super geniuses. They can't be argued against. Now I've done that to my director of engineering, but there you go. So the other thing we need to do is enhance competition. What you've seen it yourself. You go to another city, it's the same businesses. It's almost like never leaving home. You see Starbucks, you see these same supermarkets. But we need more competition because nobody, in fact, really, you've seen what's happened to American cars. I mean, American cars in the 50s and 60s, basically their idea of progress was more chrome. The engines didn't change, but when the Japanese came, Germans came, gradually showing them how to, make cars and do things, then gradually the competition. So we need more of that. But the public ownership does have a place, and the place is when you have a natural monopoly. For example, in Dallas, it's water. No, of course. Anyway, so natural monopoly is really you can't make it. That can't be competitive. It doesn't work. Healthcare, basically single payer system. That's it. That works. It's lowest cost. Single payer. It would take 2/3 of the cost out of it. And by the way, in England we have this nice system where every drug is evaluated for effectiveness. Okay, and when it's agreed this is effective, it's better than the old one, it comes into circulation. Education. Well, seems to me to be, we're spending so much, and it seems to be very inefficient. I don't know what a lot of these kids, Hispanic kids I talk to, what on earth they're doing to age 18. And what on earth they're coming out with. They don't want to be there. I mean, I've sat through truant courts a lot in my dealings, because And you see these handcuffed kids dragged in, and they don't want to be in school, they don't see why they should be there, blah, blah, blah. For some reason, we felt that every kid should be taught something or the other on the same level until 18. Well, in my day in England, most kids left the school at 15. Very rare went on to 16. Very rare went on to 18. In fact, the number going to college was only about 3, 4, or 5% of the population. So we didn't have this great notion. In Germany, as you know, you have a split in an academic level and then a vocational level. And both carry the same amount of prestige, apparently. Seems to me that and my parents left school at 14. When they basically, in those days, there was apprenticeships. In fact, one of my best friends in England left school at 15, my school. Apprentice jeweler. Now he owns a jeweler shop. He's happy as the day's long. He's got his own business. Fine. I think vocational training. I don't see why we have this plethora of of beautician schools. It seems to me that all that stuff, even simple accounting and all the rest of it that goes on, should be brought up to what we in England we'd call sixth form colleges. That's to say, basically what happened in my school, at age 16 you sat O-levels, 8 subjects, and after that you specialized in 4 subjects. So by the time you got to 18, so colleges only last 3 years because everyone is sped up. So what I'd say is we need to take a good look at vocational training. Let's train kids like these Spanish kids to be carpenters, to be bricklayers, actually, to be machine operators. Give them a trade. But more importantly is to make every kid, whatever origin, feel wanted. And by the way, we're going to find a job for you. Okay? There's no reason why we shouldn't have 1% unemployment in this country, if we wanted to do it. We really don't want to have this Marxian critique of the American economy, which said that capitalism always had this reserve army of unemployed. It doesn't make sense to have that many people, which amount to between 15 and 20 million people, unemployed. Because really the capital of a country is its people. It's not the damn banks, it's the people. Yeah, that's it. And if you have a good, trained, energetic, optimistic workforce, you're going to have a good country. But if you have these cartels buying democracy, causing crashes every 8 years, you have a very, very unhappy country. And you have this angst that I talked about earlier on, which is palpable. Now, the other thing that should happen is you should have full government accountability. So I would propose that we hold any government up to what I term as socio-economic metrics. A small list would be as following. We'd have a metric of economic stability. That's to say, the inflation versus GDP growth. We'd have an inequality, that's the pay ratio metric. We'd have a real medium pay growth versus real GDP growth metric. We'd have a trade deficit versus GDP metric. Federal deficit versus GDP metric. Global health ranking metric. Global education ranking metric. Percentage employee ownership metric. And environmental metrics. That's just a few metrics one could have. But I would say that any government should be judged on those metrics. That's my speech for tonight, folks.
Who wants to be first?
I heard what you say when you said what should be done. Are these all progressive policies, or what does a progressive party believe? Well,
this is my definition, you understand. I I'm speaking purely for me, actually. It's what I'm saying. We seem to be regressing. Okay, what these metrics show you is that we're regressing as a country. Okay, I'm saying that if you look at these metrics that I proposed, as they improve, then you're progressing. I mean, basically, well, you've heard all these metrics, and I would say they're nearly all going backwards. They're nothing to be proud of.
John, hang on? Yeah. Okay. You've talked about deregulation and several other topics that I also find troublesome. But I want to ask you some specific questions about things you might wonder if you're in favor of them or not. Do you think Congress should pass a law, for example, regulating how much CEOs can be paid? Also, do you think Congress should pass a law that would make it, how shall we say, if not unlawful, at least not a good thing for companies to send jobs overseas? Fine them or penalize them in some way.
Yeah.
And finally, one more thing. I hope this isn't too much. Do you think there should be a constitutional amendment that would allow Congress to override a Supreme Court decision?
Well, I've already said that yes about the Supreme Court. But, I'm saying that the top court should be the Senate. So you would like
do
to away with the Supreme
eliminate it
Court
altogether?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't see any point to it. Second point, jobs overseas. Yes, that's purely the result of global arbitrage, labor arbitrage. If one of my proposals was to force balanced trade, if that happened, then that arbitrage would cease. It just couldn't happen. First question was to limit CEO pay. Well, theoretically, the owners of the business, via their representative, that's to say the board of directors, should be doing that. But basically, corporations are now backwards. Since the average owner of a corporation exists for 22 seconds, it's hardly likely that they can band together to do anything about corporate pay. What I have proposed is employee ownership. That would be a self-limiting proposition. Because I've seen too many of these clowns at the top of corporations. Mostly they're ex-salesmen. Okay, look at Boeing, for example. I mean, it was a sales decision to build parts of the Boeing aircraft, this Dreamliner, around the world. Now, what did that do? Well, his idea was, well, if we sell a bit is going to be made in Taiwan, another one, blah, 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 we'll be able to sell to all these different countries. Guess what? It was late by, almost 3 years. Now, I was in the business of managing the design and issue of drawings for a lot of Xerox products. Now, we always work together. The design engineers work together with the manufacturing engineers, work together with the field service engineers as a team. You can't split this up across the world. I mean, it doesn't work. You ask anybody in the software world that's outsourced stuff to India. I mean, it's a almost complete disaster. The other thing I'd say about all of this is when we designed machines, every part had a reliability factor. Every part. We knew how good that machine was going to be. We also did maintainability analysis, so we knew how long it would take to repair, because basically Xerox oftentimes owned it. Now, when you have China entering the picture with all these parts, how on earth could you be calculating reliability? Because nobody on earth would know what they are. I mean, there are lots of ramifications for this. And these people at the top that make these decisions, mostly they're not engineers, they're not, they're most often jumped up salespeople, put on suits and act like gods. I mean, really. And one day I'll give a talk about the disaster of Xerox. I mean, Xerox actually had Windows, the mouse and everything working in the mid-70s. Gave it all away. I mean, I personally went to Microsoft and met Steve Ballmer and basically gave him the design of Windows. Didn't give it, but Xerox at the top saw no use for it. I mean, and also Apple, I mean, Steve Jobs was given a tour of PARC, Palo Alto Research Labs, Xerox Research Labs in Palo Alto, California, and he was shown the whole deal, everything, and he said, "Oh, I get it." So, I mean, yeah, he got it. You know, these people that run these companies, I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, you know, there must be employee ownership, because in companies like John Lewis, there's an internal magazine where people can anonymously complain about decisions, and the management must answer, why have you done this? You know? Because basically, oftentimes, as you know, it's the people on the coalface that know what's going on. The biggest duty of any manager is to listen to his people. Listen, ask them questions. What do you think? You know? But these people, many of them, I mean, before I left England, I was working for ICL, we had advanced technology. We were using electron beams to weld chips down onto metal ceramic substrates. That's very advanced techniques. 2 years after 1970, Xerox had bought SDS. They still had individual transistors on boards. I mean, they were 10 years out of date, yet Xerox bought it. All right,
John, here we are stumbling again over this definition of progressive. I think you helped me out a little bit here, and I believe what you said is, if you were going to define it with a little more honed precision, it might be non-regressive. Would that be correct?
That would be correct. It would be moving forwards instead of going backwards.
Moving forwards rather than going backwards.
Yes.
So I guess my question really in a general way goes to elements of your logical reasoned argument here. Mm-hmm. How many assumptions are you underpinned it? How many things are you counting on here? And
well, in every case, I've given you some metrics, some actual empirical numbers that talk about the drift of things. Okay, and in every case I've given, I would say things don't look too good.
Well, to me, this kind of comes across as a patchwork quilt of suggestions. I mean, it would. If I would relate it to, like, if I were king for a day, this is what I would do. Mm-hmm. But I see two categories here. Mm-hmm. Some of them are things that you want government or the judicial system, of course part of government, to do or not to do. But when you're asking government to do something, oftentimes you're giving them more rope to cause you to have to skip rope.
Well, it's possible. I'm not. Yes, I mean, I would like to see everything I propose put into action. I mean, basically, that's what I would do. Okay. Now, is there a panacea for everything? No. But what I am saying is things cannot go on as they are, because I mean, you cannot put off a fight. Just as Larry Elliott predicted there would be a crash in 2 years before it happened, he would now be saying basically nothing's changed, and so there's no reason for another crash not to happen. I mean, it's almost certain it will. So, but to make a better country, which is what I would hope to see, you have to do many other things that I've just touched on. Now, yes, I've skidded across a lot of things. It's been a broad brush, but that was my intent, just to say, look, these are the areas I would look at, and these are the things I would do.
Well, I'm hoping you can hone this to a sharper image, maybe even more.
Well,
Gerald Celente has predicted.
Yeah, it would take about 4 or 5 hours.
Okay. Gerald Celente has predicted the emergence of a progressive libertarian party. Again, I'm having trouble with the definition of progressive because even among here, people are not really clear what progressive always means. But I do have respect for Celente's vision of things to come. So I think you're really on point with that. So you're seeing something there. It's just every time we ask government to do something, if you recall Mustang Ranch, the IRS, of course, the Department of Government, could not even run a brothel in Nevada.
Well, this is why I'm saying government should be held to account more for what they do. I mean, after all, that's the essence of democracy, is the whole. Now, I don't care what branch of government it is and what level of official it is. Basically, they are servants of the public, so they must be held to account. I mean, basically, we have given them power to do things. Now, if they abuse it, then they should be punished for abusing it. And whatever they do, they must be held to account, which is why I'm saying you should have a whole range of metrics by which we measure them. What's the outcome of what they've done?
It's okay, Lyle. Others have observed that the fastest growing and most unaccountable part of government is called the administrative state. They promulgate regulations that become laws that criminalize activities through the Federal Register and such as the EPA through their own regulatory process. Yet Congress doesn't act on these. Do you think that the federal employees of the federal government should be able to enact laws without the concurrence of Congress? That's a yes or no.
No. Because what you're saying is that these people should circumvent democracy, so I don't agree with that. Everything must be done via the democratic process. I mean, I believe I believe in not only democracy, but economic democracy. So where we all have a say in our own lives, and we can control our own lives. But we're drifting away from that. Okay.
I was looking at the description of your talk tonight, and did you think much about recent attempts at third party? Like we had Ross Perot, Ralph Nader, Ron Paul. They had a lot going for them. Where are we coming from here? Did you think about the practicalities of this?
Well, let's say, I ended my little blurb there by saying, let's only hope. So my view is that there is a growing angst in this country. I mean, I think most people would say there's something wrong on various topics. Now, they may have different solutions to what they would do. The right would do one thing and the left would do another thing. Fine. And I would say the 2008 election was a mandate to do something. People really wanted Obama to go in there and do some things. I believe he's let them down. I mean, he's really not done very much, in my judgment. Well, first 2 years he had a Democratic Senate and House, so we had 2 years. Good. Now, in 2 years, you should be able to do something. Now, in the parliamentary system, you can do things. I mean, this lovely government, it's a Tea Party paradise. I mean, just to digress, as I always do. In England, under this coalition government, we've engaged in super austerity. That's to say, the government is spending too much, so obviously we must cut spending. So hospitals have closed, fire stations have closed, police stations have closed. I mean, in December, I was over in Barnet with my hound walking up Barnet High Street. See, Barnet is really a little town in the Green Belt, 11 miles from London. It has its own police station. I walked up there, walked up the steps, read the notice, and it said, nearest police station is in Colindale. Well, Colindale is about 11 miles away. Now, to get there, you'd have to go into London by tube and come out again. It would take you about an hour and a half to get there. I mean, you know, we're closing down every... it's a disaster. In the Greek, digressing back to Europe for a second, again, under the leadership of the Germans, the poor Greeks have been put under severe austerity measures. So they've been asked to reduce spending. And so it's been calculated that for every euro of reduced spending, the gross national product has decreased by 1.3 euros. Just what you'd expect by the reverse Keynesian multiplier when it comes to fiscal spending. Now, I have a lot to say about the wonderful Germans, which I can say right now, if you don't mind. Well, you know, Germany has only been a country for just over, 150 years or so. But Bismarck was the Chancellor of Prussia. He attacked the Danes, he attacked the Austrians, and the French, all in the space of about 8 years, all to gain territory. Germany was one of the carries prime responsibility for the First World War. Now, Angela Merkel, who refuses to let the Greeks off their debt, after the First World War, Germany was asked to pay reparations. They borrowed money from the Americans, which they never repaid, and they were forgiven. Second World War, similarly. 1953, they were forgiven again. Okay? Now, their economic miracle was explainable by getting huge American Marshall Aid funds, starting with new factories with no military expenditure, etc. The euro is explained by situation is by Germany coming in and actually devaluing their mark with respect to the euro. Greece, on the other hand, had up value. So whereas before, when the drachma was there, you'd go to Greece, it was dirt cheap. I mean, I went there as a student in 1960-odd, 61. I think it must be $2 for a week, $2 rough equivalent for a week. I mean, it seemed to be working okay. I mean, the whole euro was completely misconstructed. I mean, completely. It was a politician's dream, but really an economic nightmare. Anyway, sorry, next question.
You mentioned a lot of specific quantitative facts in here. Do you have a list of footnotes citing the sources?
Well, I would do, but I can't give footnotes in a...
I know you can't give them, but can you email them, or can we get them someplace for you?
Okay, I can try to do that to Tom. I'm writing a book called Sabotaging Democracy, which will be footnoted, but
I would love to have some of these footnotes to bring.
Well, I did write a book called Sabotaging America, which is well worth reading for those that haven't read it. Can be had on Amazon at a very reasonable price. Actually, most of these numbers I've given are on the public record, really. But I can. Ray, come on, ask the question. Other than being shot.
I'm not having that time in a minute.
Okay, all right, fine.
Are we out of people asking questions? I guess we are. We should get in. Now it's time for you get to sit down.
Okay, I'll get to sit down. Oh, you can get it on Amazon. Yeah.
Now it's your turn to talk. So who wants to? Here somebody who wants to be first. So come on up here. You got 5 minutes.
Well, first I want to thank John for the fine presentation that he gave here and the numerous facts and ideas he brought up. And then I want to take him to task on a few things. When I was mentioning logical reasoned argument, we all approach things and we say, well, this is how things are, and therefore this is logical, and this is what we need to do. But the problem with an argument of that sort is, what assumptions are you making that are underpinning your argument? What things are you leaving out? One of the big things that gets left out, and just talking about it just as briefly as possible here, the 1947 National Security Act. And we've seen kind of the earthquakes happening because of that, where we have a government behind our government. Most of us are aware of the guns for drugs going on in Iran-Contra, but it gets to the point where we had Wachovia, I think, laundering $387 billion of drug money, and they got a slap on the wrist, maybe a $100 million fine. I don't remember exactly what the fine was. Nobody went to jail. That was all privately negotiated. Well, now HSBC is back again with money laundering, drug money. We have a narco economy going on in this country. It's not just third world countries that are narco democracies, and that really has to be figured in. Well, what is happening? Well, we have an end run around our constitutional system here, and to some extent our economical system, where certain elements deep within government have said, well, we don't have to tell you what we're doing, you have no need to know, and you're not going to finance us, Congress is only going to give us this much, well, we need more money, we're going to go get it. And they're getting it through basically running, I guess the second oldest profession in the books is moving drugs around. I mean, you go back to the original charters, East-West trading, and all the opium wars and everything. You find out really these are some of the same families who were pursuing things then that are pursuing things now. I'm really tickled by, I had an internet email friend by the name of Joost van Steenis from Holland, and we were discussing something. He said, well, some of my friends got together and we were figuring there's some kind of conspiracy going on here in world events, and so we went and investigated, and we found out that the House of Orange had family members on all the boards of the major 100 corporations, and he said, so we concluded there's no conspiracy. Well, I thought that was quaint. Such things as CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports. The people are being plundered. I don't know if John is familiar with CAFR, but it was at one point, it was a huge amount, billions and in some cases trillions, off the books in private funds run by municipalities up through cities, and states had their own CAFRs, and this has been going on since the 1940s. A lot of that money got blown out with this whole derivatives debacle, but that was a huge element. The power to tax is the power to destroy. I don't know if y'all have noticed, but there are more people out there on the street, and that's only going to increase. The reason behind that, not always that they've run out of money. A lot of times it's property taxes. They just didn't have enough money, and people are losing their homes. When when the Soviet Union experienced its economic collapse, Russia and Cuba both had their own experiences, but But they had the communist system where people were stakeholders in their homes. They couldn't be kicked out of their homes. So they may not have had much of anything to eat at all, and no money for gas, but they had some place to rest their head rather than under a bridge. So I guess what I'm saying here is you can't have a solution without including a lot of these disparate elements, and as always I am recommending the conspiratorial view of history over the accidental view of history, and I do thank John for his presentation.
Okay, who's next? Come on up here, Ray. Ray Creeley is next.
Well, I am glad that John finally got around to having some solutions. Some of those solutions I would probably agree with, but I just kept going on and on. Most of the talk, 3/4 of it was complaints. What's wrong? One gripe after another: layoffs, corruption, trade deficits, rich getting all the money and all this and that, and cheap products. There's no answers there. He made a statement about the Affordable Care Act. He said, I don't know about the numbers, he said there were 30 million that are going to be without health care. I'm not going to be surprised. Do you realize that's where we started? We had to have the Affordable Care Act because all these people out there, 30 or 40 million people, don't have health care. How can we do this? We've got to have the Affordable Care Act. We've got to have socialized medicine. And when we get through, there's still going to be 30 or 40 million people who don't have health care and don't have that insurance. Isn't that interesting? And of course we need to have government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We are now being mostly ruled. If we think it's a government of the people, just try to start businesses, try to be the entrepreneur. One thing that John said right off the bat, this massive deregulation. Do you realize that regulations have just skyrocketed? Every department of government has myriads of laws and regulations. You try to start a business and you've got layer upon layer upon layer, one after the other, one bureaucracy after another, one bureaucrat telling you how you're going to have to do it. Regulations. And listen to this. Congress did not vote for one of them. Where do our laws come from in this country? Congress. These, you see, with the government departments making laws, those are administrative laws. They are laws. You violate those, you will pay the price. You could go to jail. And Congress did not vote on those laws. This has been run away. Please, John, tell us where on earth you get this idea of massive deregulation. One or two examples are not going to be sufficient, not for me. Also, one thing that made the hair stand up on the back of my neck, there's more there than the top, anyway. Stephen said, why don't we just cap CEO pay? These CEOs are making billions. How can they possibly do that? Cap their pay. I'll tell you what, let's do. We've got a problem with a high cost of education. Is that right? Let's cap the pay of college professors. I think that would be the first place to start. Do you see the same legitimacy for capping the pay for a CEO would work just as well for capping the pay of college professors or anybody else? Let's cap your pay. And see how far you want to go with that. Outsourcing products. Go ahead and penalize a company for outsourcing some product. Did you realize how insane that is? We have a very, very strong economy. We have a very good standard of living. We live really well. We can buy a lot of good products and we can buy them cheaply. You get rid of that where people cannot even outsource, and our cost of living is going to go way, way up. It is guaranteed. That's mostly what I want to say. I guess I'll stop. Thank you.
I won't talk very long. I just wanted actually to respond to some of what John said and what some other people have said. We've had experience in this country with third parties before that have actually, got somewhere, never quite made it. But we had a populist party back in the 1890s, back when people thought that neither party was addressing the concerns of the average citizen. It was called the Populist Party, or the People's Party for short. They, a lot of their, the things they stood for, a lot of the issues that they promoted were eventually absorbed into the Democratic Party in 1896 when William Jennings Bryan ran, and that party died out. We had a progressive party in 1912 where former President Theodore Roosevelt left the Republican Party and became the head of the Progressive Party, became their candidate, and actually bested the Republican nominee that year, came in second place with 88 electoral votes to only 8 for the Republican. But Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat, won because he was also a progressive. We had a progressive party again in 1948. I guess the big question I would have liked to have asked John is how do we get a third party going that might have some viability and actually be able to gain some traction. So far, the track record isn't too great. The best third party's ever done was in 1912, and that's over 100 years ago. So I really, I think a lot of what John is suggesting, solutions, what John has said are some of the problems, and what he's put forward as some of the solutions I think are I agree with, but I really wonder if that's going to work. I think that maybe if we can try first to make some changes to the current system, campaign reform, overturning Citizens United, those things I think would go a long way towards that. Finally, I'll just address one thing. The Affordable Care Act is not socialized medicine. It is far from it. It relies entirely on the private sector, almost entirely on the private sector. Yes, there are government subsidies for people who can't afford it, but I wouldn't call that socialized medicine. What they have in England is socialized medicine, and by the way, it works very well. I have a brother-in-law who is alive because of it, a friend who is alive because of it, and they didn't have to pay any bills or have to worry about insurance forms or anything like that. I wish we had socialized medicine here, because we don't. And I think that would be something that a progressive party ought to advocate. Thank you.
Okay, you're next.
Tone.
Oh, it's been a while. You forgot my name, huh? I'm Hank. All right. Well, I kind of agree with the other speakers. We wanted to hear more about how we're going to get this party going here. You mentioned in your talk, towards the end, you said, well, everybody knows we got problems. We have people dissatisfied on the left and the right. And you spend most of the time listing those problems. But so how do we do this? Well, I can't tell you that, but I can tell you that we have to open our minds even further than a third party. I mean, Ron Paul had a lot going on, and the media and power is much higher just destroyed him. It was like, it was just open. So this country's taking some major hits this decade. I think one of the big things was when we accepted the going to war against Iraq after we found out that everything they said was a lie. Another one was when they said, give us the money so we can get the economy going again, or, you know, there's this huge financial upheaval in Congress at the federal level gave the banks the money, and then they didn't do what they said they were going to do with it. And we just sat back. We just sat back. So what we have to deal with is the either-or fallacy. As you educated people know, that there are a bunch of logical fallacies. That's what logic is based on, the Greek idea of logical fallacies. There's the famous circular logic. And then the either-or fallacy is, well, you know, we're going to have to arrest that guy, or else everybody's going to be killed. I mean, there's a lot of things. We have to promote the Bible, or this guy's going to become a robber. I mean, there's other things. So we have the either-or. We got the Democrats and Republicans now, and you're introducing the third either-or, another party. I think it's so far beyond that right now. So to get a more eloquent description of that, I recommend a guy named Jerry Day. He's got these little 10-minute videos on YouTube, night and day. Jerry Day. Jerry Day taught D-A-Y. No, not gay. I'm not. D-A-Y, night and day. Jerry Day. Okay, he's got one that says, government will not save you from corporations. And he outlines how. This relates to the last two speakers. How the government owns the corporations now. It's so entangled. And he has the figures. It's very clear. So we got this either-or thing. We got to get more regulation or more government. Well, it's a two-headed monster. And it's mostly for our entertainment to keep us divided and fight against each other. So I recommend that one very highly. And he talks about the CAFRs. He knows quite a bit about CAFR. CAFR is Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. And it's not really a conspiracy. What it is, it's a report that every government agency as well as pension fund has. And you can look at it. And it shows that they have the money. But they make their own little losses. We can't spend it. We have a law. We can't spend it. But so that with their buddies, they borrow money and pay interest back to themselves and so forth. But all the blue chip companies are owned by what's called composite government. Governments now are investors. The governments don't just go out to serve the people and keep things going. The government basically is a mafia. That's one way of looking at it. So that's a boiled down thing. The CAFR is a real good key to this. Jerry Day is a real good introduction to the CAFR. And the introduction to Jerry Day would be government will not save you from corporations. So, Ray, the frontier is gone. There was if we look at history, what little we can rely on with all this fantasy they call history, we had a frontier. We could steal the land from the Indians. We could steal the land from Africa. We could steal land from India. We had a frontier. But now the frontier is our minds and us. And so this whole paradigm has to change. Jim Lugg used to come and he talked about that too. And so we're dealing with a new era in humanity. And human labor is not worth what it was once. And so I guess what I'm saying is I'm radical too. I don't really have a conspiracy, but I don't think that all the solutions are going to work so good right now. Thank you.
Well, he almost didn't leave me anything to say, but I think everything John said about problems, what they exist, and some of the things he said should happen to solve the problems are logical, but the problem is how do we get there? We're working with people, And from my basic background, I always think, what's practical? What's possible? What's possible when you have all these groups of people tied into the status quo? How do you break away from that without doing more harm than good? So that's the thing that I have to wrestle with. And I believe that government should be for the people, by the people, and of the people. It is not, and perhaps never has been, but that don't make it right. It should be that way, but how do we educate the people so that they function in the way they should? As I see the Constitution, if we, the people, could get beyond our petty differences, we could do that. We could elect people who would do the right thing. But as long as we let people divide us and not respect and not really manifest any type of love towards each other, this is going to be hard to stop. So, we have periods in history when people got fed up. They had a revolution. And a lot of people got hurt. And historians say the only revolution where all the revolutions weren't killed was in the United States, the American Revolution. A few of them got killed, but most of them survived it and didn't get killed. So I'm not advocating a revolution, but I think a lot of the rhetoric that's going on could move us in that direction. And so we need to be very careful about what we say. I'm a federal employee, retired federal employee, and I know a lot of the things you said is not true because I wasn't at the top, but I was at the level that we did the work, we made the recommendation. Congress write a law, and they say in the law, the secretary of this department has responsibilities for promulgating regulation that's consistent with the law. And if they promulgate regulations that are not consistent with the law, then Congress can stop the regulation. And we have, Congress has an investigative entity that looks at departments to see whether they're doing what they're supposed to do, and all that's there. That doesn't mean that some people can be arbitrary and capricious and do things. Give you one example for the time. I was in the government 29 years. And during my 29-year period with the government, the only president that really had control of the government was former Governor George W. Bush. He would change it. They had control. They had fear in the government, in the bureaucracy. And we argue about the bureaucracy. That's that unelected group that carries out the laws. They implement the laws, but they have to implement the laws within the framework of the law and the regulations. The regulations cannot exceed the law. And someone was talking about EPA and what they do, but even, I know John said the Supreme Court is no good, but they sanction some of the things that the EPA is doing right now, as they have the stemming from the laws that have been passed, and most of these laws was passed initially when President Nixon was president. That's when the Environmental Protection Agency was established. President Reagan didn't care much about it, so we had a lot of problems after that, and we had to clean up areas and that kind of stuff. But the government is not really the monster that you say it is. I don't think the government owned anything. We bought stock in AGI, and we sold it and made a good profit for the taxpayers, but that was to keep them from going bankrupt. And a lot of what John said is true. They had these, what they call collateral debt obligations, where mortgage was bundled together in securities and they wasn't worth nothing. They sold them all over the world. They wasn't worth nothing. Then AIG said, we're going to come up with these, another insurance formula to take care of it. It was too much and they were going bankrupt if the federal government hadn't intervened. But there are what you call government corporations, but they are not really in real competition with the private market. We do have corporations control the government. They give them money. And I was yesterday I went to the Junior College Association in Texas was having a conference in Dallas Thursday, Friday, and today. And I went to one of the meetings, and one of the political meetings, he was talking majority rule. And I raised the questions about what's the impact of money. And he said, didn't have no impact. I said, well, in 2012, it didn't have, Karl Rove had a big bunch of money. He spent it and didn't win any candidates. But he said, well, I look at this, but no one has analyzed the ones we have right now. I do know that Norquest forced had a number of people, Republicans, to sign an oath not to increase taxes, and that hasn't been done. So, but when they do take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and so a lot of them, let's be certain that what we said thing is right. We have people write books from all over the spectrum, and we have to have a little common sense ourselves to analyze this against what the Constitution says, what we think is right. And that's what I recommend. But if we don't get the people to want to move from the Democratic and Republican Party to the Progressive Party, and the gentleman that preceded me, he talked about the Progressive parties. What they do, the parties had enough sense then to adopt it and make it a part of it. And that's how we got a lot of the progressive things that have been done is because of that. And if Ross Perot hadn't stopped for his daughter to get married, it may have been different. But that's how I see it. Thank you very much.
Okay, who's next? Have we got a next? He wants to do it again, I know. We don't have much time. I got one thing to say. No. Well, wait a minute. We're gonna just a minute. I'm going to say something. And I got to thank our speaker for doing a great job here tonight. I think he did terrific. It opens our minds for what is wrong and what we need to do, what we can't do. Personally, I ran for Congress 4 times, and I know that the laws relative to third parties, that a third party has to get 5% of the vote of 5% of the people to even get on the ballot. And there's the two-party system that we have now. The two parties have passed laws in Congress that support the two parties. They've made it very, very hard for a third party to even get off the ground. They can't even get registered anywhere. And so I really like the facts that John brought up here tonight. I think he's on target on everything. But I personally don't think that a third party will solve the problem. I think what needs to be done is to make changes that we see. For example, Lightbulb Johnson, when he was president, he said that he started the war on poverty. Unfortunately, additional government spending doesn't always solve the problem, because additional spending usually means additional taxes, and then we have a fight over who pays the taxes and who really benefits. I personally think that a shorter workday without a cut in daily pay and increased overtime rates would alleviate the problem. But then corporations would flock together to leave the country to go where labor costs are cheaper. Thus, we need to put tariffs on corporations equal to the difference in labor and environmental costs, so they will produce things here. Then we could shorten the workday without fear of them leaving the country. But the corporations control the Congress, and we can't get the Congress to act responsibly against the corporations. That's the problem we have. So we have to take action to have the Congress pass something they will go for that will help society. When push comes to shove, Congress will act to have free airtime, maybe the last 90 days of a general election, as they will be able to keep the money they raised, and there's no real history of a challenger beating an incumbent. But in reality, this will give a challenger a great opportunity, if used properly, would defeat an incumbent. The end result will be a Congress that represents the people who do the electing, instead of those who are buying votes and favors in Washington. Then we could put tariffs on corporations, shorten the workday without cutting the pay, reemploy 25 million Americans, and grow our economy without fear of the dollar being knocked off its pedestal as a dominant world currency. That's my view anyway. What's the problem?
Not a problem. Do you want to mention how we started that certain partnership in Ohio?
Oh yeah, I was involved in a third party thing at one time. It was the Labor Party, and they never got any candidates off the ground, and they never really got going. But it lasted for 2 years, and I went to different meetings some time ago, and that kind of influences what I had to say about what I just said. Anyway, that's what I think. So, Ray, you might have some time here. You got something you want to say? All right.
I'll try to do it quickly.
We only got a couple minutes.
back when the first George Bush was running against Bill Clinton. This was Bush 41. Bush said no new taxes, remember that? Then all of a sudden, it didn't work, we raised taxes. A lot of people says, oh my goodness, he betrayed us. And so now here comes Ross Perot. Ross Perot, for some of us as conservative, for my wife and I, he had some good sense. We like what he was saying. Ross Perot got 19% of the vote. That is enormous. Somebody mentioned 5 or 10%. That was enormous. That has not happened. I mean, that was the third party, Reform Party, whatever he called it. And the problem was that helped put Bill Clinton in the White House. There was just enough votes that Bill Clinton went over the half, the 50%, and he won. My wife and I, the day after that vote, we thought, what have we done? If Ross Perot had not been in there as the third party, and if most of that 19% had gone to George Bush, we wouldn't have voted for Clinton. But if we had voted, that 19% had gone to George Bush, it would have been a landslide. And we would not have had Slick Willie, the womanizer. We would not have had him. We would not have been through that. My wife and I realized, good grief, we helped put Bill Clinton in the White House. But God has forgiven us.
We got 1 minute.
That's all I want. I didn't want to drag you out.
We got 1 minute and then...
I just want to say the most important thing. I always forget the most important thing. Okay. Well, we're talking about problems and stuff. I think something that really bugs me, and I don't know why it don't bug everybody more. Woo-hoo, not so loud. I only got a minute, Secrecy. This state secrecy, this police state thing. This is really anethemic. What's the word? Anathema. Anyway, antithetical is what I'm trying to think. It's antithetical to what America's about. And John F. Kennedy said this, and of course he was killed right after that. But this secrecy thing is really up there.
Okay, I guess that's it. We get our speaker back now. He gets to get up here and comment on a comment and close this meeting. So, come on up here, John.
Well, again, thanks for the questions and the rebuttals and stuff. My intention really of proposing a third party is really this. There's a lot of unhappy people, and there seems to be a plethora of unhappy groups. Now, I could never believe that a third party would leap out front and gain an election. However, what it can do is speak truth to power. And really, that's what I would hope from this, that if enough dissatisfied people together, because I agree with Hank, a lot of problems we have is pure lies and deceptions, actually, and hiding the actual intentions of these people in power from us. And really, a main function of a party that will be a progressive party is to hold up the mirror and say, folks, this is what is going on. Now, remember, it doesn't take too many people really to promote that and to hold up this mirror and say, look, take the war in Iraq. Well, it was based on lies, pure lies. Tony Blair was responsible for the dodgy dossier that was fabricated. There were no weapons of mass destruction. In fact, we see ISIS as really the product of going to war in Iraq. And basically what's happening in Iraq is there's been tremendous religious divides, and they're all separating out into different religions, which no doubt will start warring each other before long. Before that, many of these countries had, Jews and Muslims and Christians, Coptics, all living together reasonably well. But, look at the outcome. That was predicted. So, what I would say is, I agree. The best sanitization of getting good government is daylight. A searchlight on these people, which is why I said, let's have some metrics. Who is funding you? What are your policies? And what have you done? How has it helped America? How has it helped the people? So I'm not expecting, frankly, a progressive party to get into power. But if you have a bright enough searchlight and you shine it on these people and make them stand there and say, just like if you have in John Lewis, if you don't like something, you make the management explain, why did you do this? As I would have liked to have done at Xerox on many occasions. Why did you do this? Why did you buy Tektronix recently and wreck it? Tektronix is a great company. But Xerox took it over and basically wrecked it. So, these things happen because people at the top, control things. Politicians control things. Now, basically, a CEO is a servant. He's a servant of the people that own the company. But they act as if they're rulers. And that's the way these politicians act. They must be reminded over and over again, you're a servant. You must explain what you're doing. Who's paying you? Why are you doing this? And in answer to you, Ray, regulate, you must have some regulations. Nobody can drive down a street at 90 miles an hour, for example, not near a school zone. You can't do that. So there must be some decent regulations. So I'm not in favor of ridiculous regulations just because some bureaucrat, wants to do it. Never. Also, for small businesses that start up, I would make them exempt from many of these regulations because most of these businesses that start up will fail anyway. So why put more roadblocks in their path? I want more businesses. I don't want to stop businesses, okay? You know that. I want more competition. I want this thing to work. Okay? So, that's the answer there. So, that's my main hope, really, is that we can shine more light on these people and make them more accountable and have decent metrics that we all can agree on that people know about. So we publicize this. These are the metrics. This is what we want to happen to our country. And we measure them. Are we moving forward? Do we have a better educated population than we did before? How is our general health? So on and so on. Talk about regulations. Are we really poisoning ourselves with this food we're importing? What are we doing with these drugs we're importing? Talk about regulations. I personally wouldn't buy a generic drug. I don't know where it's come from. China, India? It'd probably kill me rather than cure me. We believe, frankly, we believe, my wife and I, in exercise and eating right. My wife had a back problem, went to back institutes, was charged hundreds of dollars, didn't, so she exercised. She went back to Finland, she learned how to do exercises, cured herself. She went on the Alexander technique about a neck problem, which is cured herself. There's a lot of things you can do without generic drugs and buying all this stuff. And why we need all this cheap junk from China, I do not know. My parents would always, in the 50s, they would always save up and buy something good, quality, rather than buy 5 junky things. Now, to me, it's a waste of money. A waste of time. I'd rather have something that lasts and is good than some junky thing, that falls to pieces in 5 minutes. To me, it's a false premise. And you can't have a country that's built on junky things. Look, the infrastructure. Look down the street. I mean, these wooden poles that hold our power supply. I mean, look, ugly and junky. I mean, it's silly. It's really, we need to grow the economy. We need to invest more in ourselves, and you can only do that when you grow an economy. And we know how to do that. Keynes told us 75 years ago how to do it, and why to do it, and what works. But this plan we're under now is not working. It's a disaster. I mean, really, it's a disaster. It's an economic disaster.
Very good, thank you. Well, that's it for tonight. We'll go down to Starbucks down the corner. Our speaker's welcome down there. You can bid some more if you want, whatever you like. So, just so you know, we have to be out of here by 9 o'clock, just so you know.
This is William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like us, or follow us, and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call. So when visiting the Barbex restaurant, tell them you want your